Now, the root of it, right? مُدَامُهَا الْقَرْقَفُ حُبُّ الْمَنْزِلَةِ. It's powerfully intoxicating wine. Qarqaf is a wine that makes you shudder when you drink it. That's what the Arabs call it. رَعْدَ عَنْهُ صَاحِبُهُ. It like makes him shake. It's so strong, right? You see these films where they throw it down, they shake, right? So he's saying it's like a intoxicating wine, which is love of position. حُبُّ الْمَنْزِلَةِ. In other words, the reason people oppress other people is to get a position. حُبُّ الْمَنْزِلَةِ. I want to be over somebody else. Right? I want to be above other people. Like Napoleon, right? The desire to conquer. And it can happen, a'udhu billah, in the petty realm of offices, right? The petty mudir, the petty manager in the office who has to assert his petty authority over other people. And so he oppresses them and causes harm to them without any just reason, just because he wants to let them know, I'm in charge, I'm the boss. And that you can just magnify it to the realm of geopolitics, right? In other words, that same impulse, there was an interesting article that Yahya Emmerich wrote about Saddam Hussein, which was just to say, how many little Saddams do we have all over this ummah? Right? I mean, we all say how horrible he is, but really, how many of, he said, your average characters at the masjid, if they were given the same authority, would not turn into that same character. Right? These petty little tyrants on masjid boards and things like that. That if they had the ability, they'd have people's heads, people they don't like, off with his head. Thank goodness they can only backbite and do all these, little ways of trying to get rid of them and things like that and undermining their authority, right? But it's just magnified. So Baghyu is deep, and it's all about position, wanting to be in the eyes of others, right? And so he says, remember that. فَاذْكُرْ إِذَا أَرَدْتَ أَن تُخَلِّلَهُ. If you want to turn this wine into vinegar, in other words, make it halal, remember that that's the source, the root of it, is wanting this. And then he says, to remind us, كَم مِّنْ أَمِيرًا نَالَ مِنْهَا أَمَلًا. How many an amir got all the position, all the power he wanted, right? Everything he had. And then he says, ثُمَّ اسْتَوَى السَّاجِدُ وَالْمَسْجُودُ لَهُ. And then all those flunkies that he had around him, when he dies and they die, they're all the same in their graves. Right? So what he's saying is, just remember, all this power that you can obtain in the dunya, in the end, death is the great leveler. It equalizes. So Hitler and all his Gorings and Goebbels and all these people around him that were all obsequious and doing whatever he said, and in the end, they're all the same in death. They're the same in their graves. And this is also one of the things that people do around these people, because they get power just by being around them. It's the groupie syndrome, right? Just to be around them, right? Which is the opposite of the people of Allah who wanted to be around the Prophet ﷺ to be close to Allah. Not to be close to some illusory power, but to be close, because the power that they recognized that Allah had granted the Prophet, and that desire to be near to Him, goes on in the akhirah. So you see, so it's not the same. So he's saying just to remember that everybody's equal by death. And then he said, and also remember, وَأَنَّهُ مَيْلٌ عَنِ الْمَوْلَى إِلَىٰ عِبَادِهِ الْمُفْتَقِرِينَ الْبُخَلَى. And know that this desire for حُبْ الْمَنْزِلَةِ is an inclination towards the servants of Allah, which is a move away from Allah. Because if you incline towards His servants, you move away from Him. And he said, they're all muftaqireen. They don't have anything. And they're bukhala. And even the little they have, they're not going to give you any of it. They're misers. So what he's saying is, it's a vain pursuit. It's a foolish pursuit. وَأَنَّ فِي رَعْيِ الْقُلُوبِ تَعَبًا إِن تُرْضِي بَعْدًا فَرَّ بَعْضٌ بُغَضًا. He said, not only that, رَعْيِ الْقُلُوبِ is ta'ab. It'll wear you out. If you're always trying to get position with people and please people and get people to love you, you'll get worn out by doing that. Right? And in the end, he said, some of them you'll please, and others, they'll hate you anyway. And some people, إِنَّ الْكَرِيمِ إِذَا أَكْرَمْتُهُ مَلَكْتَ الْكَرِيمِ إِذَا أَكْرَمْتُهُ مَلَكْتَهُ إِنَّ اللَّيْمِ إِذَا أَكْرَمْتَ تَمَرَّدَ. The nobleman, if you honor him, he'll show honor to you, right? You'll possess him. But they said the la'im, a vile person, if you honor them, tamarrada, he gets angry. It upsets him because he resents it. He resents that, and that's the nature of a la'im. So what he's saying is there's going to be people, no matter what, they're selfish in nature. And also, then he says, وَأَنْفِ رَعِي الْقُلْبِ وَلَكِنَ الْحَرَامُ مِنْهَا مَا رُعِي بِخَدْعِ أَوْ رِيَاءٍ أَوْ تَصَنُّعِ. But keep in mind that, the concerns with others' affections is not this. What is prohibited in regarding the pleasure of others is what is done by trickery, ostentatious display of religiosity, riya, or hypocritical affectation, tasannu', which more is like a affected genteelness, trying to be show uprightness, but it's not really true. So he's saying that that's what's haram in dealing with other people. You can't cheat them with khida'. You shouldn't use riya, and you shouldn't use tasannu'. وَمُبْتَغِي رِضَاهُمُ لَا يَنْتَظِرْ رِضَى الْمُصَوِّرِ الْعَزِيزِ الْمُقْتَدِرِ. Not only that you don't expect the pleasure of Allah if you're always looking for the pleasure of His creation. What our scholars say is seek the pleasure of Allah, and then if you're pleasing to Allah, you'll be pleasing to the people of Allah. And all the other people, you shouldn't really care what they think. Right? In other words, if you're pleasing to Allah, the people of Allah will love you because they'll see this person is a person of taqwa. And the other people, who cares? You're wasting your life if you're trying to please people that aren't worthy of being pleased, of gaining their pleasure. Right? So it's a good thing to want to please people of Allah, good people. It's a good impulse, because in their pleasure is Allah's pleasure. If you honor the people of Allah, that's Allah, and we're told to do that. In the hadith, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu was taking the camel of Zayd ibn Thabit, and then Zayd ibn Thabit, when they departed, he kissed his hand. He told him, "Don't lead my camel. You don't need to do that, because it's humility." And he said, كَذَلِكَ أُمِرْنَا أَن نَفْعَلَ بِالْعُلَمَاءِ. This is what we were commanded to do with the ulama. And then when he kissed his hand, Zayd ibn Thabit said, and like this we were commanded to do with the people of the family of the Prophet ﷺ. The point being is that you honor people according to their, some people should be shown extra. And that's not what he's talking about here. And then he says, وَمَنْ حُبَابُ أُمِّهِ يَرِينُ بِقَلْبِهِ فَطَبُّهُ الْيَقِينُ. حُبَابُ أُمِّهِ. Hubab al-Umm is the dunya. It's one of the names of the dunya, which is the حُبَابُ أُمِّهِ يَرِينُ بِقَلْبِهِ. It's like the one whose heart is encrusted with the love of this world. حُبَابُ أُمِّهِ is love of his mother, right? Because the world is where we came from in the sabab, the realm of sabab. But to love it will encrust the heart. فَطَبُّهُ, the Arabs say طَب, طِب, طُب, they're all three are correct. It's muthalla. طِب is usually the one used. طَبُّهُ الْيَقِينُ. And it's طِب, the cure for it, the medicine for it is certainty, yaqeen. And then how do you gain certainty? وَجَعَلَهُ لِلْمَوْتِ نَصْبَ الْعَيْنِ فَهُوَ صَابُونٌ لِهَذَا الرَّيْنِ. And so he says, thus, if he places death in his immediate presence constantly, this acts as a detergent for the soiled matter covering his heart. So in other words, the more you reflect on death, the more it polishes the heart, which is why the Prophet ﷺ said, أَكْثِرُوا مِنْ ذِكْرِ هَادِمَ الَّذَّاتِ. Do much remembrance of the destroyer of pleasure, which is death. In other words, always remember death. It's something that Muslims should do. It's a practice. The Prophet ﷺ said, he once passed by a group of Muslims, and they were laughing heartily, and he said, أَكْثِرُوا خَارِطُوا مَجَالِسُكُمْ بِذِكْرِ الْمَوْتِ. Mix in your gatherings the remembrance of death. In other words, you shouldn't always be frivolous. And so he was teaching them. It's not that you shouldn't laugh. There's times to laugh and things like that. But he was just reminding them, don't let your majlis just be laughter and fun and never really thinking about serious matters. A beautiful hadith, the Prophet ﷺ once asked, somebody asked Aisha, Ya Aisha al-Mu'mineen, tell us the most wondrous thing that you ever saw about the Prophet. أعجب شيء رأيت من رسول الله. You know, what was the most wondrous thing? And she said, كان أمره كله عجب. Everything about him was wondrous. In other words, I can't think of one, it was all amazing. And then she said, but I will say that in the night, when the veiling of the night came, and every lover went to his lover, he went to be with Allah. It's so amazing, subhanAllah. You know, when everybody goes to their lover, it's the night, he went to be with Allah. And she said, I used to see him standing in the night remembering his Lord. And so he was somebody who was always aware of the presence of death, the closeness of death. He said, إِنَّ الْمَوْتَ لَأَقْرَبُ إِلَى أَحَدِكُم مِّن شِرَاكِ نَعْلِهِ. Death is closer to one of you than the strap on his thong. The strap on his thong. Death is right. It's always, you know what it is? One way to look at it is somewhere on this planet there's a door to the unseen world. And you're going to walk through that door. And your door is somewhere. You don't know بِأَيِّ أَرْضٍ تَمُوتُ وَلَا تَدْرِي نَفْسٌ بِأَيِّ أَرْضٍ تَمُوتُ. You don't know which earth you're going to die in. But there is a door with your name on it. And when you reach that point, it's death. And you pass through it into the other side. And suddenly all of this is like a dream. Right? This becomes like a dream state. You'll look back at this as if I was dreaming. كَمْ لَبِثْتُمْ يَوْمًا أَوْ بَعْضَ يَوْمٍ. How long did you tarry? A day or maybe a part of a day. It was just like a dream. أَوْ كَلَّمْحٍ بِالْبَصَرِ. Like a blink of an eye. Dunya, when you're confronted with eternity, will suddenly seem like it was nothing. We'll have vague remembrance of it. Because it's the big awakening. And so the idea is that you should be aware that that door is waiting, and it could be the next step that you take. Right? It could be the next step. It's always there. And so that's why he says, اجعل الموت نصب عينيك. Put it right in front of your eyes. In other words, feel like that door is right there and you're about to walk through it, and you'll live your life in the present. You won't be like the rest of the world that's either in the past or the future, grieving over the past or hoping for the future. You'll be living in the present world. And those are the only people that are really alive. Everybody else is dead. Those are the people of the present, right? And that's why they say, Al-Sufi ibn waqtihi. You know, the Sufi, it's a proverb in the Arab say, Al-Sufi ibn waqtihi. The Sufi is the son of his moment. He's the son of his time. He knows where he is. He's in the present moment. That's one of the meanings. One of the meanings, he's also aware of the age he's living in. But that meaning is ibn waqtihi. He is present. He's the son of the moment. And that's what being aware of death is about. Right? And then he said, وَاعْلَمْ بِأَنَّ حُبَّهَا الذَّمِيمَ مَا لِمَحْضِ حَظَّ النَّفْسِ لَا لِيُسْلَمَ مِنْكَ وَتَسْلَمَ مِنَ الْعِبَادِ أَوْ لِلتَّزَوُّدِ إِلَى الْمَعَادِ. And know that love of it that's blameworthy is that which is solely for the benefit of the nafs. Not in order that you're safe or that others are safe from you. In other words, that it does not include, love of dunya does not include desiring it so that others are not bothered by your needs and you are safe from dependence upon Allah's servant. And you are safe from depending on Allah's servants or dependence on Allah's servants. Nor does it include desiring it as provision for the next world. So if you use the dunya for this world as a sullam, as a stair to the next world. This is why Sayyidina Isa in the Islamic tradition said, "Ad-dunya qantara fa'buruha wa la ta'muruha." The dunya is a bridge, so pass over it to the next world and don't try to build on it. Right? Don't think you're going to be here forever. And then he says, realize too that blameworthy love of this world, indeed, love of this world falls under the 5 categories of legal rulings. Thus, its ruling is based on what it helps one to achieve. In other words, it goes under the 5 categories. Wajib, right? So we should love those things in the world that help us achieve akhirah. Like we should love the Kaaba. It's in the world. And we should love the Prophet ﷺ, who's in the world, partly. And we should love the people of Allah. We should love the books of knowledge. We should love things that are means. And we should love our brothers and sisters who are Muslim that help us in our deen, things like that. So all of that is wajib. Mandub, there's love that's mandub. And then love that's mubah, like love of your children, love of your wife, your husband, things like that. And then love that's makruh, and love that's haram. So he says, فَحُبُّ مَا مِنْهَا إِعَانَةٌ عَلَى شَيْءٍ مِنَ الْمُحَرَّمَاتِ حُضِيلًا. So to love anything that helps you to do something haram is prohibited. And then he says, وَهَكَذَا وَذَمُّهَا مُقَيَّدُ بِغَيْرِ مَا عَلَى النَّجَاةِ يُرْفِدُ. So it's the censoring the world is really only for those things in it that do not help towards salvation. وَقَيْدُهُ قَيْدٌ لِذَمِّ حُبِّهَا لِذَانَهَا خَيْرُ الْوَرَىٰ عَنْ سَبِّهَا. Thus its reproach is restricted only to its love for those reasons. Indeed, the best of creation, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, prohibited cursing the world. There's a hadith in which the Prophet said, لَا تَسُبُّ الدُّنْيَا. Don't curse the world. Because Allah created the world. And the world is a means to achieving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowledge of Allah. And really, dunya comes from a word, some say it comes from dana'a, and some say it comes from danu. There's a difference of opinion. But it's different from alam, which is, alam is the world. Alam. This is the world, alam, like nature, all these things. Dunya is the hayat dunya. It's the ephemeral aspect of the world. It's all the hustle and bustle that people get caught up in. That is dunya, and that's what Allah warns us about. Hayat dunya, being deluded by this ephemeral thing. Whereas the alam that Allah has created, alam comes from the root meaning is alama, which is a sign. So the alam is the greatest sign of Allah. So the cosmos in and of itself is the greatest sign of Allah. And that's why it's not something that we despise or look down on. We're not like traditional Christian doctrine, even though they've been trying to get rid of it for the last 100 years. Their traditional doctrine is to condemn the world. The world is evil. And the evilest thing in the world is a woman. I mean, that's traditional Christian doctrine. And we don't say that. We say, like Allah says, هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ لَكُمْ مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا. He created everything in the world for you. لِتَعْتَبِرُوا. Some of the ulama say to reflect on it, to take you to Allah. Some of them say تَسْتَفِيدُوا, to benefit from it. Others say to be the khalifa, to guard it, تَرْعَوْهَا, things like that. So all those things are there. Since things are only praised or blamed, وَإِنَّمَا تُمْدَحُ الْأَشْيَاءُ وَتُذَمْ لِمَا تَجُرُّ كَالشِّفَاءٍ وَالسَّقَمٍ. So things are praised or blamed on what they result in, like either a cure or a harm. If something leads to a disease, it's blameworthy. If it leads to a cure, it's praiseworthy. And that's the way you should look at things. وَمَا بِهِ إِلَى مُهِمَّاتِ الْبَدَنِ تَصِيرُ مِنْ مَالٍ وَمِنْ جَاهٍ حَسَنٍ. Anything that is obtained of the corporeal necessities of being in the earth. In other words, food, housing, shelter, all those things, those are not considered dunya. And in fact, even by Sharia, the first wife of a man is not considered dunya, right? And if he marries for things like orphan or to take care of a poor thing, that is also not considered dunya. If he marries a second wife or a third or a fourth wife, simply, for dunya reasons, then it goes under that category, which in that case it's still mubah, right? It's permissible, but it doesn't have the same category like this. He's saying this is a good thing, hasan, right? So ma bihi ila muhimmat al-badan tasiru min malin wa min jahin hasan. Things that get you wealth or get you a good jah. Jah is a name or a position. And they say that having a good name is good to help other people. Not in and for its own sake, but actually to help other people. right? وَكَرِهُ إِكْثَارَ جَمْعِ الْمَالِ خَوْفَ خُرُوجِهِ عَنِ الْحَلَالِ. The ulama have disliked getting too much wealth because of the danger of doing haram things. In other words, the more wealth you acquire, the higher the probability that you're doing things that are displeasing to Allah. And so, most of the ulama consider it makruh, ikthar, adhaakum mutakathiru. You know, you become entertained or engrossed in amassing and vying for wealth. So it's a dangerous thing, and people get addicted to stock market. They get addicted to these type things. It becomes an addiction. وَكَاسِبُ الْأَمْوَالِ لِلتَّفَاخُرِ عَدُّوهُ مِنْ مُكْتَسِبِ الْكَبَائِرِ. Also, somebody who earns wealth, لِلتَّفَاخُرِ, to say, you know, look at me, look how clever I am, look how much money I have, look at all these things. أَهْلَكْتُ مَالًا لُبَدًا يَقُولُ الْإِنسَانُ أَهْلَكْتُ مَالًا لُبَدًا. Man says, oh, look at all the wealth I've consumed. Right? If you do it for those reasons, the ulama reckoned it from the people who have acquired enormities. مُكْتَسِبَ الْكَبَائِرِ means you've done a kabira. That's a kabira. It's haram to do that. And then he says, وَحُبُّهُ الْمَدْحَ بِمَا لَمْ يَفْعَلِ سَبَبُهُ الطَّمَعُ فِي غَيْرِ الْعَلِي. Love of praise is another disease. Love of being praised for what one has not done, not accomplished, is caused by desire for other than the exalted. So people who love to be praised for other than what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has praised them for. And that's considered to be haram, to do that. It's a disease of the heart. So you should only want to be praised for what you've done, although some of them say that you shouldn't really desire praise except from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, although they don't prohibit it. In other words, it's not necessarily a bad thing to like that people say ahsanta, and the Prophet ﷺ did say that to people. And there's a difference between madah, madah that's haram, and madah that's permitted. The madah that's haram is flattery. And that's what the Prophet said, أَرْمُوا فِي وُجُوهَ الْمَدَّحِينَ أَرْمُوا التُّرَابِ فِي وُجُوهَ الْمَدَّحِينَ. Throw dirt in the faces of flatterers. It's people that are telling you how wonderful you are, and it's not true, or they don't mean it. And like the poets used to go to the Khalifas and write these amazing poems, Mutanabbi has all these poems he wrote to Saif ad-Dawla, and it's all just midah, it's telling him how wonderful he was. So that's a bad type. Whereas telling somebody genuinely, ahsanta, you did a good job, or something like that, that's not prohibited. And particularly in people that, you're not really worried about them becoming deluded about themselves. So it's an encouragement, because it's part of thanking somebody, things like that. And then he says, وَرْسَمْ بِحُبِّكَ زَوَادَ النِّعْمَةِ عَنْ غَيْرِكَ رَحَسَدْ تُحْسِنْ رَسْمًا. Anyway, he says, سَبَهُ وَالطَّمَعُ فِي غَيْرِ الْعَلِي. الطَّمَعُ is the reason people praise others and also love to be praised, is they want something from them, right? So that's a disease. If you want to be praised for what you didn't do, it's really a tama'. Because, it's a pretty despicable thing to enjoy somebody telling you, you did a great job and you didn't do anything. And you didn't do anything. That's a despicable thing. You're saying, oh, thank you very much. I'm really glad you appreciate the work. And you didn't do any of it. Which happens in universities, professors that have graduate students do all their work and then they get credit for it. It also happens in many corporations where you have a team and it's really, the manager didn't do anything. He just assigned things and they did all the work and then he takes all the credit. It's a very common thing in human. It's obviously part of human nature because it was recognized centuries ago by our scholars and also by the Quran, that Allah says that they love to be praised by what they didn't do. So it's actually, in the Quran. And then he says envy. I'm going to stop with envy because that's a really long one because it's like a major illness. So we'll do envy and riya, inshallah, next week. Jazakumullah khairan. Takbir! Takbir! Takbir!